I'm honored to have with us several distinguished leaders who are working to break down the unique barriers facing women and girls in STEM and helping to create a diverse future of tech where they can thrive. My name is Maureen Lonergan. I'm the Vice President of Training and Certification, and I am super passionate about building a diverse workforce, technical and business as well. We spend a lot of time building programs that are designed to do just that. And with that, I want to allow our guests to introduce themselves and give us a little bit about their background. Lucy?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Lucy Herr, and I'm the Chief People Officer at Slalom, and I'm very happy to be here. Slalom, we do a lot with AWS, and so really happy to join all of you for this conversation this evening.
Hi, my name is Carolyn Paola, and I'm the account director with an organization called Year Up. And no, that's not Europe, it's Year Up. Prior to coming to Year Up, I actually spent 20 years in startups and emerging growth companies in the Seattle tech ecosystem. So I have a real passion for access to opportunity, as well as DEI, or should I say DEIB, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So thanks for letting me be here today. I'm really excited about it and being with our distinguished panelists today.
Aisha?
Great, thanks so much, Maureen, and it's also great to be with you all, albeit virtually. We are certainly leveraging the power of technology here. So great to be here. I had to answer Heather when she reached out to ask us to be a part of this panel. And so it's really great to connect with Heather as a fellow ID&E practitioner. I serve as Slalom's Chief Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Officer. And it's just really great to be here. Maureen and team, thanks for having me.
And Tap.
Hey, Brian Taptich. Most people call me Tap. You should too. Very happy to be here. I run the worldwide specialist organization for AWS and desperately try to be as inclusive and diverse as possible in our organization.
He's understating that. Brian is an amazing ally for women at AWS, and so that's why I wanted him to be on this panel. So, Carolyn, we partnered with your organization, Year Up, to deliver our AWS Restart program in the Bay Area. Together, we're developing skills for young and underrepresented technologists. While Year Up's focus is not specifically women, it is a priority to reach gender parity in the program. What are the mechanisms you're putting in place to achieve this?
Well, currently, 43% of our students are actually female identified. So we do know we have more work to be doing. We'd like that to be more 50-50. Like everyone, but young women in particular face really big barriers to get into tech, and part of it also is influenced by their social networks or lack thereof. And so some of the mechanisms that we've put in place really is that each of our young adults that finish the tech, or shall I say the technical training, the learning and development phase of our program, actually get and earn a 6-month educational hands-on work immersion internship. So it's really the exposure. It's exposing females to tech and getting them their hands in there and understanding what it means. I've had so many young females say to me, I never thought I was good at IT, and they're just rocking it. So also, I really think it's about setting the expectations with them that just because they are in tech doesn't necessarily always mean that they have to go into coding necessarily, but that it's a bunch of other things. It's biz ops, it's digital marketing, it's help desk, it's all of these things. And so really exposing them to that. And then also another mechanism that I think is really important for females, in particular underrepresented minorities, is wraparound support. So if a female isn't set up for success, to really have resources to kind of combat, I should say, the challenges that they might be facing, whether that be with childcare or shouldering the responsibilities of elderly care or extended family care. Those resources need to be wrapped around the young adult to really enable them to be successful. And so we have full-time social workers on staff that really help to assess those needs and then work with the young adults to make sure they're successful. So those are some of the things we're doing.
It's amazing. I think your point on being in tech doesn't necessarily mean being in a tech role. And I'm certainly, I'm arguably run one of the larger tech organizations within AWS, but I graduated from school with a communications degree, right? And just literally fell into it and fell in love with it and had to grow and learn. And so I'm always talking to, I started out as a training coordinator, about 1,000 years ago. And, but I always say, like, if you're eager to learn or you want to learn, you're gonna really thrive in an environment in tech. Lucy, how does Slalom approach developing talent in the community and then recruiting women into early career talent roles?
Yeah, so maybe I could talk about recruitment first and then retention and development, because I think they're all very, very important. And from a recruitment standpoint, just like all of you, we hire lots of experienced people. And over the past several years, we've been investing in dialing up our hires, university hires and early career hires, and investing in technical academies, consulting foundations, et cetera. And so recruitment has been really big in terms of being intentional about recruiting diverse early in career talent is one. The other thing from a recruitment standpoint, we've really challenged ourselves to take a step back and to be as inclusive, diverse, and equitable in our hiring processes. Hi, Carrie. And we designed an inclusive recruitment program, and this year we had every one of our recruiters go through it, and it's really ensuring that our hiring recruitment processes end-to-end, from the candidate experience to the interviews we do, to making sure our interviewers reflect the diversity of our community, to how we make the selection decisions. We have our recruiters go through unconscious bias, microaggressions, cultural intelligence, and just to make sure that the process end-to-end is as inclusive as possible. And I will tell you, huge ROI on that investment, ensuring that our recruitment processes end-to-end, from a candidate experience standpoint, educating our hiring leaders has been really, really effective. I think retention development is really important, and like a lot of companies, we invest a lot in learning and development, and everything from leadership development to developing amazing people leaders, people managers. I feel like our work is never done there, right? The role of people managers is just so incredibly important to technical trainings. But we've also put heavy focus on retention, and I will tell you, I hear often from our people that, one of the key drivers of retention is that when our colleagues look up and look around, they want to see others who look like them. And I will tell you, I think we have an opportunity, like many of your companies, in terms of making sure we've got great diversity at the senior leadership ranks, to make sure that as we think about not just development, promotions, advancements, that there is equity in all of those people processes. And so that's something I have a lot of passion about, making sure that from an end-to-end standpoint, recruitment to how we develop to how we retain people, that there is equity in our processes.
It's amazing. Aisha, many tech companies are not yet set up to support women, in particular women of color. In fact, 40% of women who make it into the field leave within the first 5 years due to culture. How is Slalom continuing to focus on a culture of inclusion while growing rapidly in a remote setting? And how can technology help level the playing field? That's a loaded question.
So let me start first with, for us at Slalom, hopefully you all are able to hear me. If you're not, I'll just need someone to tell me because I can't see the audience. But having said that, we lead with inclusion, diversity, and equity. And what that really means is, how are we creating the culture, to Maureen, your earlier question. And so our work in this space, particularly with regard to the culture that we're inviting teammates into, that teammates continue to exist in, for those that have had tenure longer than a year with our organizations, we're leading with the data. What are our employees saying to us? And we're doing that in a measured way, not only as we look at teammates that are joining us 6 months or a year, and measuring how they're experiencing the culture. And one of the areas that we are measuring is how valued and included they feel. We also annually, like many organizations, many of you are annually getting the pulse and the sentiment of our employees. And so one thing that we are doing within Slalom is leading with the data and allowing the data to first set forth the experience, the sentiment of our employees. And then we're stratifying that data to be able to understand any unique nuances, like many organizations are, as it relates to diverse identities. One of the things that we have also done is become what I would like to refer to as more surgical, taking a secondary and a tertiary approach to peeling back the data as we think about women, not as a monolith, but very much as a dynamic and very diverse community, or those that are gender expressing. So our ability to be inclusive from a perspective of gender is mission critical, and we're doing that with our data. What we have begun to find is looking at those differentiated experiences are helping us to drive laser focus on programs, strategies, and initiatives that we can begin to launch to more readily wrap our arms, albeit virtual, in this setting, around our employees to create a more inclusive culture. So to net it out, what Slalom is doing is, one, we're leading with the data, allowing our employees to share their sentiment both in a qualitative and a quantitative way. We're leveraging that data to go deep to really understand those nuances and or opportunities, both good practices and opportunities to develop, to drive focused efforts. And then with that data, we are partnering to begin to develop programs that help us to create a more inclusive culture that meets the unique needs, specifically to Carolyn's earlier point, as we think about women of color, which is another area of focus for us at Slalom. What are the things that we want to begin to do in an inclusive way that begins to meet the needs of our women of color population, and more broadly speaking, inclusion? One of the things I'm very excited about that we will be sponsoring is a 6-month Building and Shaping the Future program, where we will invest in not only women of color, we will also have an inclusive cohort for all diverse identities to focus on career development and driving that career acceleration.
Wow, that's really cool.
Thank you. So TAP, how do you model allyship as a male leader at AWS, and how can organizations scale better allyship practices and drive inclusive culture?
Yeah, so I think the good news about, there's a bunch of good things that are about working at Amazon. One is just the sort of scale of our businesses, right? So we have, I love what Aisha was saying about being sort of data-driven in the approach, and I love what Lucy was saying about sort of the ROI. We have the good fortune of, being organizations of scale, being able to look at data and say, okay, here's where we're doing well and here's where we're not doing well. And I think that for me, and Adam talked a little bit about this. There was a fireside chat he did a couple days ago. There's sort of this personal component to being an ally, and then there's this professional component. And the personal component, one, is extremely important to me as a father of 2 daughters. But it's making sure that you're kind of acutely aware of not just diversity, which in some ways is sort of the easiest of the 3 dimensions, because it's very simple to kind of look around and say, like, all right, well, are we diverse or are we not diverse? Equity and inclusion is a lot more subtle and a lot more challenging. So as a personal matter, it's disciplining yourself to make sure that you're kind of constantly listening and learning, and not just, there is the data-driven component, there's also kind of the observational components. So just making sure that there's a level of awareness, not just for yourself, but you're projecting that out to your leadership teams, your organizations, and again, whether that's making sure that making sure that there is an appropriate amount of diversity in your leadership team, on your team overall, but also that the way in which things are being done and the way in which language is being handled is inclusive and equitable. It's hard. It's subtle on the personal side. On the work side, the great thing about another great thing about working at Amazon is we talk a lot about not relying on best intentions, right? So it's not just about you can't just rely on people doing the right thing. Like you have to have the right mechanisms, the right ways to measure and gauge and monitor success. And so it's not as simple as just saying like, well, we need to be better at this. You really do need to be looking at the data and making sure that you have the programs in place, both at the top of the funnel around hiring and developing the best, and also down the funnel around inclusion and equity. And it's a full-time job. And the good news, back to Lucy's point about ROI, is it just makes business sense. Like, even if you don't think it's morally or ethically the right thing to do, the amount of research that's been done that just says like, you're an idiot if you don't do it because there's higher ROI if you do, is overwhelming. So it's the right thing to do as a personal matter. It's absolutely the right thing to do as a business matter.
Yeah, I think it's in our organization, and we've talked, Tap and I have worked together for many years. It's one of the things that we talk about is the inclusion part is, for me, is the hardest, and really being thoughtful and listen to the organization and make sure we're developing talent and that it is equitable. We both used to work for someone who was, he would have quarterly meetings, and there were few women in the room, and he used to walk in the room and do a kind of a recap the next morning, and he would specifically say, like, for me, I really struggled to find my voice, right? And he would say, Maureen, what'd you think about yesterday? And I think there's things that, as allies, that you can do to bring people into the conversation in a very comfortable way. And it was never awkward. It was always just like, hey, what did you think? Did you have fun last night? What did you think about the customer? And I think as I've grown in my career, that's been incredibly important. And he was an incredibly strong leader and really helped me to find my voice within the organization. And
And this is one of the, probably the biggest first step in this journey is acknowledging that that the non-diverse often are the ones that are kind of in charge and controlling the environment.
Yeah.
And accepting that, embracing that, well, if there's going to be change, like it's probably going to come from non-diverse leaders.
Yeah.
And unless you acknowledge that, it's like walking out of this restaurant and taking a wrong turn. Like suddenly you're in the wind and you're like, what the hell? I was trying to go to my room,
Yeah.
And so just making sure you're sort of taking the right turn from the get-go.
Yeah. So Lucy, according to the 2020 Lean In Women in the Workplace report, 76% of mothers with children under the age of 10 say childcare is one of their top 3 challenges during COVID, compared to 54% of fathers with young children. It's important that we as leaders acknowledge that many hats of working mothers, being authentic and about the reality of the sacrifice and trade-offs families need to make. How has your organization addressed the impact of COVID with women?
Yes, it's, first of all, let me just acknowledge how incredibly tough it's been, I think, for all of us, all of our companies. We've tried a number of things, starting with even ensuring we've got programs in place that support all of our people, in particular, working parents. And, Slalom, we're a mid-market, rapidly growing company, but, there are things that we didn't have in place. And so we recently launched a family care program that provides backup care and elder care, by the way, right? Because I think many of us are struggling with aging parents. And so we wanted to make sure that from a people program standpoint, we had programs in place to support our people. We dialed up our investments in health and well-being, and mental health and well-being in particular. And, like a lot of companies, right, we gave, wellness days we launched the Thrive account, which is a personalized well-being account that each person can think about how they want to use funds to think about whether it's emotional, mental, physical well-being. We had a wellness town hall. So we did all the programmatic things that was important. I think the most important thing, because this article talks about the challenges that women face on a number of dimensions. Every company, like my job, and I'm sure my colleagues, any CPO, CHRO has been super challenged with how do you lead through a pandemic? None of us have done this, and we're still trying to figure it out. And it felt like our approach to return to office, future work was very reactive. And earlier this year, we decided, what's our approach to the future of work? How do we want to be as an organization? And we came up with this, what we're calling our Best for All approach. And work should work for you and for your teams. And what flexibility means to you may look differently to what it means for your teams may be different. Teams could be comprised of your own internal teams, it could be your clients, it could be your partners, because we are a consulting firm. And so we said, hey, our future work, our approach to work is work should work for you and your teams, and each team should discuss and agree on the team norms and what works for your team. Flexibility absolutely is a cornerstone of this. Again, being able to articulate individually as a team what's important to you. Like we were debating, do we do video-free, Zoom-free Fridays? But if you're a global company, you know, Friday here is Saturday in Australia, right? And so anyways, we talked a lot about giving the freedom and the flexibility, because one size doesn't fit all. Embracing rapid experimentation is part of this too, and trying out, as Aisha will tell you, we've tried a lot of different programs and things in terms of what works, what doesn't for teams, and if ideas stick and they're good, then how do we share that broadly? And so just embracing experimentation is really important as well. And so again, I think this kind of Best for All approach and formalizing that and saying cornerstone is key to that. Hybrid ways of working we will forever embrace is a part of that as well. And so we've really tried to articulate, let's not get so hung up on we got to be back in the office on this date or whatever, but this is kind of our approach to the future of work, which has really helped a lot. And then lastly, I'll say as we go forward, you know, all of us in this room, the role that we have in being authentic, open leaders, because again, none of us have it figured out either. I don't know about you, but I've got aging parents that I'm dealing with, kids' mental health, and it's tough being a kid and raising teenagers and young adults in today's world. And you know, it's been really important for us as an executive team to lead the way, set the tone, be honest, be open, be authentic, and talk about we're in it together. You know, none of us have it figured out. We've got good days, we have bad days, we have days that we're languishing, and so we've been very open in our communications about the fact that we are all in this together, we're on this journey together. So I do think it's helped. I mean, I look at data as well. We talked about being data driven, and you know, when I look at our attrition, I think everyone is dealing with, you know, higher than ever attrition issues. Yep. As of today, and this year, our attrition of men is 4% higher than women. And so I know other companies have talked about the reverse. We have reversed that trend over the past 2 years. And so anyways, I'm not saying that we're perfect. We've got a lot that we can learn and we continue to do and experiment with, but I think we're doing some. I mean,
that's amazing, because I think women have been disproportionately impacted by COVID in a big way.
Yes, especially like in the fall of 2020, I read the Wall Street Journal article like many of you and looked at our numbers, and our attrition of women was super low, right? Yeah. And then when we looked at the reasons why people are leaving and so on, and so anyways, like I said, it's so important to try different things out. And as Aisha spoke about, we've got lots of listening mechanisms to listen and get feedback and take an iterative approach as we go.
So Aisha, Lucy had mentioned programs. How is Slalom innovating and upskilling women in your workforce to meet the demands of tomorrow?
Yeah, so as I think about just the career trajectory from early in career talent through to executive leadership, there's a lot that we've done. And to Lucy's earlier point, there's a lot that we are experimenting with in an effort to try to drive towards gender parity and also mirroring our communities. One program in particular that I'm really proud of, that under your leadership and your team's partnership, we have begun to launch and focus on technical upskilling of women from a cloud perspective. So when we think about closing that digital divide and leveraging and elevating the diverse talent through arming them with technical certifications, the work that we've done with AWS through our ADA program was one that helped us drive towards parity in AWS certifications for women and men. And we actually exceeded our parity goal with regard to achieving those certifications. So that's one mechanism that we are leveraging. We're also experimenting with other programs that not only include a pivot on women and upskilling our talent from a gender perspective, we're doing that broadly across diverse identities through our Breaking Barriers program. Again, the underpinning goal is how do we continue to diversify our population of technical talent to arm them with opportunities to create and accelerate their careers within slalom and as they continue to grow. And so those types of programs are helping us to create differentiated experiences for our talent through not only certification attainment, but also creating broader communities, again, albeit virtual, to drive that inclusive nature or that pivot on inclusion when you think about being able to bring talent together in these types of cohort experiences to drive towards greater attainment and closing that technical and digital divide. Additionally, what we're also doing is through our cloud academies, as well as Lucy pointed out, our Consulting Foundations program is leveraging those opportunities to also go after the non-traditional talent. So talent that may have chosen to take a break from the workforce, talent that may not have had the technical skill set, but we want to leverage this Consulting Foundations opportunity as a way and a method by which to gain and garner that technical, that skilling, that passion for technology. And that's helping us to create, again, a broader technical cohort of talent within our organization. And then the last area that I'd point to is one thing, while we're not yet focused on women, we absolutely are pivoting on how we continue to focus on mirroring our communities. And a program that I point to that we've launched just this year is our Springboard 8 program, where we are very much focused on inverting the graduation rate of Black men. Our goal was to go from a 15% graduation rate of Black men at Seattle Community College to 85%. And I'm really excited to share that through the partnership with both Seattle Community College and Slalom, we have inverted that graduation and academic attainment to 100% of those individuals that are participating.
That is incredible.
So that's an example of how we're looking to leverage and bring the scale of slalom, the expertise of slalom, but also the expertise and partnership of organizations like AWS and others to help us create and broaden that digital divide, or I shouldn't say broaden, close that digital divide, and doing so with an eye and a lens on diversity.
Yeah.
I think you guys have done such an amazing job. When we worked with you on project, we went to Slalom to ask them if they would pilot a women in tech program and set aside time for them to take training and certification. And they had some really aggressive goals. So it was a great partnership, but it's clearly a huge focus for you, and the results speak for themselves.
I have to say thank you to you and Heather and Phoebe and the team. It was I think Heather and a couple of slalomers who had dinner and came up with this idea, and the partnership has just been phenomenal. And we were at a Project Ada luncheon today, and it was fascinating hearing some of the learnings from some of our participants. And one of the things that really made a difference was the cohorts. Yeah. And even at Springboard 8, we had cohorts of men with mentors and coaches and so on. And I know even in our own leadership, I like data as well. And when I look at kind of retention data, we are leaders who go through these amazing leadership cohorts, the retention is higher. Yep. And so, that has been kind of a common thread. And so for us, I don't know, maybe because we've been in COVID times, and that connection and that sense of community is really important. But if you don't embrace that, I would highly recommend, doing things in cohorts really helps a lot.
So Carolyn, how is Europe intentional about increasing representation of women internally? And what support systems are in place to help women thrive after the initial onboarding?
Yeah, well, and I just love what Lucy just said about cohorts, because it's really about creating those networks for women and underrepresented communities to come together. So we actually have learning communities, tight-knit learning communities, and we do wraparound support services with like mentors, coaches, program managers. And one of the other things that we're doing, and I've been really passionate about, Nyesha, you hit my heartstrings when you talked about the retention that you've been able to create with your Black males in Seattle College. And we actually partner with affinity groups. So we have a really strong partnership with the Black Employee Network. at Amazon, and I can't tell you, I get teary-eyed even thinking about the relationships that have been created, and students coming to me and saying, I saw myself in their eyes, and now I know I can finish strong.
Amazing.
And Anthony Cole, one of the gentlemen that's now the president of the Ben, he actually informally met one of our students, a black male who had a dream of working at Amazon. He didn't earn an internship at Amazon, but he earned an internship somewhere else, and he kept in contact with him for a couple of years, and now he's working full-time as a developer at Amazon. So just again, I get chills. And then also, again, just those wraparound supports, whereas if students can see, and young adults and women and underrepresented communities can see themselves in other professionals, and they're brought into the conversation, they're brought into the fold, they really feel a sense of that belonging, which is really huge. It's imposter syndrome runs wide and large, particularly with our female identified in tech. So we really work on connecting them to resources like Ben. I can't tell you how many female identified students that were in internships that I connected with Ben, even interns that weren't, or students that weren't interning at Amazon. Also, we partner with AWS Enterprise Sales. And what we did this year, and I'm really excited about this relationship, was that we assigned ambassadors at Amazon to all of our sites across the US to work in our local communities and bring skills labs, cloud introductions. We've done mock networking, mock interviews, how to write like an Amazonian, just bringing those skills and allowing students to test them out in a safe environment has been huge, particularly for women that are feeling already a lot of imposter syndrome. And then we also provide stipends. So educational stipends, we're a nonprofit. So we provide educational stipends throughout the whole year of the program. So it includes a stipend during the learning and development phase to help counteract some of the costs. Again, cost is a huge issue, particularly for women and underrepresented minorities to upskill. So the stipend goes throughout their internship as well, and really helps mitigate some of those costs that are involved in some of the barriers that particularly women and underrepresented minorities face getting into education.
It's amazing. TAP, what programs or mechanisms has your team put in place to develop and elevate women in your organization? And what is the impact you see from those efforts?
That's a lot. So, as I'm sure a lot of you know, Amazon has kind of these rules of the road that we call our leadership principles, and there are 16 of them now. There were, until recently, 14 of them. I kind of look at two of our leadership principles, hire and develop the best, and ownership, as kind of guides for creating a more diverse, inclusive, equitable environment for underrepresented minorities and women. I think on the hire and develop the best side, sort of there is on the hire side of hire and develop the best, just being very intentional about it's hard, right? It requires a lot of discipline because at the end of the day, it's kind of a simple trade you're making, which is I'm willing to invest more time to make sure that I have a diverse workforce than I am to fill this position as early as possible. And for all of us, that's a really hard decision, right? Because we're all under pressure to deliver results, another one of our leadership principles. But if you're not willing to invest that time, guess what you're going to end up with? A lot of people that end up looking like me. And so just because it's just a math problem. And so, we're very intentional, and we make sure that we, are investing the time to make sure that, the top of our funnel from, candidate identification all the way through the interview process, we ensure that we make sure that everybody who is in the interview process, one, is representative of the candidates that they're talking to, and two, has gone through our inclusion training, just to ensure that everybody's having as positive an experience as possible. And ideally it works out, it might not, but again, back to the data-driven, we can look at it and we can do the surveys, and we can figure out where where are these points of friction and try and solve them. So that's kind of the top of our funnel. And then around the develop and ownership, right? The develop the best is, making sure that we have the programs in place that are focused on, everybody. And so, we look at data around things like inclusion training. We look at data around things like, mentorship and sponsorship, of our underrepresented minorities and our women in technology. And then the ownership bit is also about kind of the inclusion and really as much about the equity. It was making sure that, we're giving opportunity, we're creating opportunities that people can own, and then promoting the success of those. Because we talked before, I kind of think about it as there's this top-down component and then there's bottom-up component. And the top-down component is like making sure that we have leadership in place that is diverse and representative. And so, by investing the time to make sure that we have the diverse candidate pool coming into the funnel, is bearing fruit. So we look at the numbers, and 80% of our director level hires this year have been diverse candidates, and of those, 3/4 of those have been women in technology. So, it's paying off. But up front, it is a really hard decision to make. It's a really hard decision to make. And then the bottoms up is getting programs in place, where we're tapping into veins of entry level opportunities that can sort of naturally lend themselves to be sort of more diverse communities. And then you wait and you look and you hope and you work hard to make sure that this sort of top down and bottom up kind of meet in the middle. And I'm not sure we've met yet, but I think I'm super optimistic about sort of directionally where we're going.
I think your point about leadership is so important. When I was doing recruitment for some executives on my organization, it's recruiting sends you what you just keep sending, and I get a list of 20 candidates, and I'm like, there's not a diverse candidate on the, and so I went back to them and I said, I won't talk to anyone until I see 50% resumes from both, and I'll interview every single person. But we have to be very thoughtful and intentional, because we're never going to increase the diversity within the organization if we don't have leadership that's in place. So with that, I shall ask you, what is one of your big takeaways for the audience today? What policies or programs or best practices can leaders put in place to help women in tech thrive? I'm actually going to ask all of you, so I'll give you some time to think about that. But
yeah, one of the things that I know you said big takeaway, I'm going to just give two, because TAP began to introduce it, and I think it's really important that we also kind of drive that home, is language is important. And being able to ensure that the organization is galvanized and rallied around language. In other words, what does inclusion, diversity, and equity, or whatever alphabet soup the organization chooses to pivot on to drive their work in this space forward, what does that mean for us as leaders, as people leaders, and as individual contributors is so mission critical. And the language that we use to begin to exemplify and communicate that across the organization is mission critical, because it does a couple of things. It drives alignment, it drives accountability, and it drives ownership. And so language is mission critical. The last piece that I'd offer up, and this is one thing that we've done, we are an organization that has a culture of experimentation, is the power of sponsorship and looking to ensure that our women have opportunities to have advocates that are in the room speaking about who and what they are as professionals, the talent that they bring to the organization, using their bargaining chips to create areas of access and opportunity for the women that are not in the room. And so one of the things that we did, and I would offer to this audience to pursue, is how do you begin to leverage advocacy as a powerful policy and strategic differentiator for not only pivoting on greater gender diversity, but broadly speaking about investing in developing the next generation of technical talent. We've done that experiment in our data and analytics organization, and we've launched that with our Women in Data initiative and are looking to roll this program out more broadly across the organization as a mean and a pivot to our investing in driving greater advocacy to ensure that we're developing a pipeline, we're growing and nurturing the pipeline, and that those that are in positional power know who this talent is in the organization and are using their bargaining chips to create access, opportunity, and visibility for that talent.
Lucy, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think just to build upon what Aisha said, one of the key takeaways and learnings for me is the importance of taking what I'll call a whole systems approach to equity. And we've talked a lot about hiring, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, having commitment to diversity in the pipeline is so important, because at the end of the day, we always want to make the very best hiring decision.
Yep.
I think the worst thing is for someone to feel like that a person is hired not because that they were the best fit, right, but because they were diverse. And so I think making sure that the hiring processes are diverse, at the same time in terms of equity, commitment to pay, to development, to promotions as well. And this is something we're diving into, and no company is perfect, but you'd be shocked to see, even from a promotion standpoint, like why isn't there greater equity in how we do promotions? And so really taking each of the processes from a hiring standpoint to how we pay, to how we develop, to how we promote people, and making sure that there is equity across the board.
Caroline?
Yeah, I also want to add on to something that Tap mentioned, which is, I mean, it is hard. We have to be very intentional. And one of the things that I've really noticed is that management is really important too, because you can't manage the same person or a college student coming from a 4-year degree, a privileged background, as you can underrepresented minority female that hasn't stepped foot in a corporation before, or it's new. They're gonna get there, but they might need a little bit more wraparound support, particularly initially. What we've noticed is sometimes it might take our young adults maybe a little bit longer to reach that bar, but when they do, sky's the limit. So I just want to ask that managers don't necessarily manage the same way each individual, because it's very, very different, and one size doesn't fit all, and you have to look at it very differently. But one other thing I wanted to mention was that we can prioritize equitable hiring all we want, but if we don't create a supportive culture more broadly, then underrepresented minorities and women will not take advantage of upskilling. They will not feel supported, and they will leave. And we don't want them leaving the workforce. So again, just having those equitable hiring practices, but also building the culture and the supportive culture, much like you've been doing and you are continuing to do at Slalom. I'm just really impressed by that, is really important.
And finally, Tap.
Oh, the last word. So I think I'd like to take the flip side of managing kind of down differently, which is my advice as we talk about kind of recruiting allies and creating allyship is be really, really cognizant of who you're talking to and the message that's going to resonate, right? Because I think there is a trap here, which is presuming, I talked before about sort of the personal and the professional, is presuming that people have best intentions and will do the right thing, if presented with the opportunity. Unfortunately, we are at a place now where you kind of can't count on that. And by the way, it may not be because you're a bad person. It may be because you're just under too much pressure and you don't have time or interest in thinking about it. But the angle that you're going to take as you try and foster allyship, be really cognizant of who you're talking to and what messages are going to resonate. And what I tell people is, as you're talking, trying to recruit allies, trying to create allies, in some cases people are going to do it because it's the right thing to do. But if nothing else, it is such an easy story to be able to tell around ROI and just that. Adam said it the other day. I literally can't imagine a world where we can properly serve our customers, not being representative of whatever our customer base looks like. Like, it's just impossible, right? And there's tons of academic studies that sort of back all of this up. And so when I'm talking to my people about this, and in moments of frustration, I'll say, like, look, we don't have a choice. Like, we have to do this. And if you don't do this, it may not mean you're a bad person, but it definitely means you're a terrible business person.
Yeah.
So, make the right choice and do it, if nothing else, for that reason.
So I wanted to thank everybody. It's been a really good conversation. Thank all the panelists for coming, and thank everybody who attended today. Really appreciate it. And I hope everybody was as interested in this conversation as I was. There's some really good things going on, and I enjoy the partnerships with everybody on these panels. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. So we also want to open it up to the audience, just for any questions that anyone has for the panelists. I can run the mic around, but we had such a good conversation. If we want to dig into any other area, feel free to raise your hand up and I'll come on over.
Hi, is that working? You mentioned a couple of times the inclusion training. So I've always thought that inclusion is something, I don't know, it doesn't seem to me as if it's something that can be taught. I was just wondering if you could talk a bit more about what that training entailed and how you sort of built that training out.
Sure.
Go ahead, Tap or Aisha, whoever. I think a couple of folks very qualified to answer that.
I'm qualified not to answer the actual development of inclusion training, because that's not really what I do. I think, like, the best that I can do is leverage the hard work that people who actually know what they're doing are doing, and just modeling the right behavior. It's really subtle but important things, like, Aisha talked earlier about sort of the language that you use. And the kind of culture of a culture of interruption, right? Even just something as simple as those things is not saying "Hey guys" and not cutting off like people. Turns out I'm an equal opportunity cutter offer, but just being really conscious of the behavior that you're modeling is for me half the battle, and then leaning into people who actually know what they're doing.
Aisha, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things we're doing on the inclusion side?
Happy to. And so to Tap's point, the inclusion training, specifically from a slalom perspective, it was inclusive recruiting training. And as Tap pointed out, it was a training that is focused on how we taking proactive actions to ensure that our processes, as Lucy spoke about, from sourcing talent all the way through the funnel of hiring talent, are inclusive, that we are exemplifying and modeling the behaviors. It's about the inclusive behaviors that Slalom has set forth, as has Amazon. There's a body of behaviors that every organization will identify as behaviors that are in alignment with the strategy that an organization is driving from an inclusive perspective. As an example, how are we bringing in individuals that have more of an introverted pivot, and really arming individuals in those learning sessions with tools and skills and different actions that they can take to make sure that their actions are inclusive, their language is inclusive, and how they go to market, in particular with our inclusive recruiting training with identifying talent. Our training specifically at Slalom was a 6-week-long session, and it entailed everything from those inclusive behaviors all the way through to how you create and use various strategies for diversifying your pipelines from a sourcing perspective, how you leverage ERGs to create an inclusive and a process where teammates or perhaps potential hirees might feel that they see themselves in the organization. So leveraging our ERGs as a critical pivot, or what I would say is a spoke in the recruiting process, as well as making sure that we're arming our hiring managers with education with regard to our overall strategies. And so the inclusive recruiting program was very much a 6-month skill building program that focused on behaviors. It focused on skills and various tactics that can be leveraged to diversify your pipeline, and then that proactive, or what I would call that practical application of being able to apply that when going after and creating those diverse panels and diverse slates of candidates that we hope will be able to successfully convert into diverse talent in our organization.
Yeah, and if I can add, I know your question is about inclusive training. I do think the points made earlier about language and the words we use, and even at Slalom, most companies say DEI, we lead with the I, because we do believe it's important that every single person feels connected, has a sense of belonging, right, has psychological safety, et cetera. And so I do think the trainings are important, as Aisha's spoken about, but so is the words we use and how we set the tone. One of our core values, we have 10 values, is celebrate authenticity. And it's one of my personal core values. It's important because we want each person to truly be able to be themselves at the work environment. That's not always the case. And so I do think the training is important, but I also think, okay, if inclusion is important, then how are we leading by example? How are we setting the tone? What are we measuring? Like we look at inclusion as part of our inclusion, we have an inclusion index. And so anyways, I do think it's important to take a kind of a holistic approach. The training is absolutely important, but so is, what does it really mean? Why is it important?
Lucy, if I could just add one more quick thing. One of the things that we are also doing is taking our employees through an experience called Why for ID&E. Why is really creating your personal commitment to what inclusion, diversity, and equity means for you, and what you are committing to do as an individual within the organization to drive that work forward, but also to model and create that culture that is inclusive, that ensures equitable and fair and transparent processes, and that brings to bear the outcome of being able to have an inclusive environment that is equitable, the visible outcome of diversity. And so that's the other pivot on why I was so excited when Tap mentioned language, is how do we galvanize an organization so that we're all speaking, if you will, the same language as we think about inclusion, diversity, and equity within our organization as well.
And I love that you just said that too, because one of the things we're doing at Year Up as well is internally, is we've actually added a diversity component to our goals each year. So as a professional and and managers and directors and executives, we all have to have a diversity component to our goals and what we're doing to feed that, and what stage are we at in our learning and in our growth. So I think that's really important to put into KPIs as well.
Is your mic on? Okay. Any other questions?
I've got a question. You mentioned KPIs and you mentioned an inclusion index. And I'm curious what an inclusion index is.
Yeah, so we look at a number of data points. We have what many companies might call a pulse survey. We do anniversary surveys, and we have questions specifically around feeling valued and included. And then also, like a lot of companies, we have our annual engagement survey, and there are a set of questions, 8 in particular, that make up the inclusion index. And it's something we look at, not just engagement all up, but do our team members, do our colleagues have that sense of feeling valued and included and having a sense of belonging? Yeah.
And then do you have targets around it? Like, is that one of your KPIs that you're aiming for, and how do you address that?
So, it's interesting that we could go in a whole separate conversation about carrots, sticks, et cetera, incentives. And right now, I would say we're at the place in the journey of sharing the data and bringing visibility to it, and how are we progressing year on year. In fact, every year we have now what we call Common All-Up Employee Experience Index. That's the dashboard of several different metrics, and just bringing visibility, I think oftentimes, makes us want to do better. Candidly, I know Aisha and I've spoken a lot about this around holding leaders accountable, right, to ourselves, to our organization, and should there be a tie to incentives, and I think that is a next step. We're not there yet, being candid.
I think there was one more question behind you, Jody. Yeah.
So I have about 100 questions, so I hope you all don't have any plans tonight. Sorry for everyone else.
Can we grab a drink real quick?
Yeah, maybe. I'm going to try to, and forgive me if I stumble here, but TAP, I think you said TAP?
That's it.
You said something that was interesting. So I work for a startup company, tremendous pressure to hire fast. And, but on the positive side, I have one of the most diverse teams I think I'm 57% diverse on my team. But a lot of that is chance. It's not necessarily, selective in the sense that I just, the resumes are coming in, but the candidates that are coming in have been diverse and they've been extremely talented. And I don't have the ability to, I don't have the resources that maybe some of the larger companies have, larger HR departments that can go and do all the screening. And I post jobs, and almost all of the resumes that come in look like me. Like, what to help me, because I do have requirements to hire extremely fast. What recommendations or what advice or to help find a more diverse pool? And I'll give you a little bit of a context. So I posted a handful of jobs. All the candidates that came in, essentially, they all look like me. And I personally went on LinkedIn one night and I scoured through LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. It's not sustainable. And I was sending LinkedIn messages to them to get a more diverse pool. And I got a ton of responses. And I interviewed all of them. And one of the two finalists, one was a close friend that was in my network, worked with me before in the past, known candidate. I knew exactly what I was getting. And I was almost sold on the hire. And I took a chance on another interview, and I was just floored. And it was a female. She's going to run my DevOps team. But I put the work in. I spent my entire night going through LinkedIn. I can't do that. And the second thing on that was, on the salary requirements, every male was significantly higher than what the females were asking for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And when we ended up presenting an offer to her, I gave her significantly more than what she asked for.
That's
just
great.
From a standpoint of like trying to close the gap.
Nice job.
Good. Good.
So I think the question is
Women always
for someone who doesn't have, I can't spend every night on LinkedIn as much as I wish I could. like where do I go? What do I do? How do I get a bigger pool?
Well, I'm
Go ahead.
happy to start. So a couple of things. As you were, what is your name?
Jonas.
Jonas, nice to meet you. I think a few points. When you spoke about your posting, one thing I would say is, be mindful of the words that are on the JDs and what's posted. Because oftentimes, if you take a step back, most of the times JDs weed out people versus inviting people in. And so that's something that our recruiters took a look at, job descriptions, to make sure that the words we use were not more masculine and unintentionally weeded out more than inviting people in. And so that was an important aha. The other thing from a pay standpoint, our company, we don't ask for salary histories anymore. I mean, there are certain states and countries where that's not legal anyways. We just made that a policy across the board to say, put the onus on us to say, what is this job paying in this market? And that is what we pay versus asking what salary, what do you make? Because we're only perpetuating the inequities that exist already. And so I think that's really important. And I applaud you, Jonas, for paying more than she asked, right? And then from being a startup, I would say, there are companies out there that can help you on the recruitment front. And even for us, even bigger companies, even when I was at Microsoft, we would often use recruiting vendors to help us during busy periods to ramp up. And especially, I would say, to help you if you're looking for, it's so key that you've got a strong pipeline of broad, diverse candidates, a candidate pool. And so investing in diversity sourcers who could help you with that. And then you or others on your team can screen those resumes, right? Those candidates. But again, investing in kind of diversity sourcing, I think would be a good use of time. Or hire a recruiter. I think it's a great investment, great ROI in terms of getting a recruiter who can really help you with that.
Sure.
Yeah, we actually have a public benefit corporation called UPRO, YUPRO. It strictly works with Europe grads, students and young adults from underrepresented communities, as well as we have community partners that we partner with that also work with underserved communities. It is a talent acquisition firm, but it's a public benefit corp, so the funds actually go back to feed our nonprofit programs and supports for the students. And so again, a diversity source there, but also take a look at where you're doing your postings. If you're just doing them on LinkedIn, then you might not get the most diverse candidate pool. And thinking about maybe I'll do some postings on some community college boards. Things like that. I mean, I think we dismiss community colleges and really, I'll tell you, a lot of young adults now are wanting to not go to universities and want to do their own training or take a gap year or whatever. They might take a little longer to get there. In fact, we've now increased the age of the students we support. We were only doing 18 to 24-year-old young adults. And now we increased it then to 26, and now we're even going up to age 30. Because if you're a woman or a minority or underrepresented talent pool, you're not graduating college until you're almost 30. So I just encourage you to not dismiss by degree. There's a lot of research out there too that happened during the downturn, the last financial downturn that there was a lot of MBAs out in the workforce, and we started putting them into roles that weren't necessarily required to have degrees. So I'm not dismissing degrees, I'm just saying don't dismiss the talent just because they might take a little longer to get there at the same time.
I agree with all of that. And my first comment, I think I started by talking about how, we have this great luxury at Amazon because we are operating at scale, and it turns out that in my background is much more on the venture-backed startup side. And I remember in my first couple weeks at Amazon, people were getting very anxious about some decision that we needed to be made, and I kind of stopped everybody. I was like, I just want to make, we're pretty sure Amazon's going to be making payroll next week, right? And I was like, yeah, I think so. They're like, okay, we really don't have problems, right? Yeah. So I think all of this is true. I think also, though, here's what's not in the best interest of anybody, is your company going out of business, right? That doesn't serve anybody's purpose. So I think there is sort of a spectrum. You have to be this is horribly pragmatic, but there is kind of a spectrum of, you have to be realistic about the level of investment you can afford to make, right? Because the worst thing in the world is having a perfectly diverse workforce that doesn't have a job. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you should never use that as a crutch, and you absolutely should explore kind of all the available options. But different companies are going to have different levels of tolerance, right? Is that okay to say? I think it is.
Yeah, and they have these benchmarks. And I'm going to mess it up, maybe Aisha or Lucy know, it's a GDIB, Global Diversity Inclusion Benchmarks. And they give levels of where you're at in your organization's cycle in terms of inclusion and diversity. And it's okay, you might just be starting out, and you can continue to increase that. So GDIB, Aisha, do you know? Yeah, I know, I'm just drawing a blank and I apologize. I've kind of got data going in my head, but it's something. So, I think you're doing the right thing, and just by being aware of it.
Yeah, and being aware, and the fact that you have this very impressively diverse base you're starting from, right? Getting back to what we were talking about before, where there's, as you're going through the recruiting process and the modeling that's going to happen as people start growing in your organization, it's, you've got the foundation. So Keep it up.
One thing, Jonas, because to your point, you and Tap said you don't have time to spend on LinkedIn all night, but you also led with you have one of the most diverse teams in the organization. And so as you begin to consider investing in a recruiter in tandem, as you will have more opportunities come available, is to go to your team and say, I need you to give me 5 individuals in your network that you are willing for us to begin to have time with. Either we are going after them as we're scouting them for future opportunities, or we have real-time opportunities. So what am I saying? It's taking and sharing the load of what you're doing as one individual and multiplying, having a multiplier effect by leveraging the diversity of your current team to say, open up your network and give me 5 people and let us go after and scout that talent, as well as our organization considers what we will invest in by way of talent from a recruiting perspective that will help us in accelerating our ability to fill these jobs.
That's great.
Yeah, thank you for that, Aisha. I think that's a really well-made point, too. So just want to thank everybody for coming, and the panelists. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts and sharing them with everyone.
Thank you.